My name is Laura Hughes. I work for Centrifuge. Centrifuge is a nonprofit based in Cincinnati. We help tech startups grow and scale, and we also operate a co-working space called Union Hall. That's primarily my job, is managing the space and getting our members leased to work out of the space. So Linnell, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do?
So my name is Linnell Ollinger. I lead talent development for the Kroger Company. In addition to that, I've had some expanded responsibilities of leading our task force that helps support all of our COVID efforts, whether it was kind of the reactionary plan to the pandemic initiating to how do we return into an office environment.
Thanks. Mike, how about you?
I'm Mike Ellery. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Sparks. We work primarily in the live event marketing world, and as you can imagine, this has had a massive impact on our business. We've had to pivot pretty quickly, both in multiple phases, the initial response to the pandemic, and then also differentiating our business to be able to, manufacture and change what we do to help our clients get back to work, to provide them with the supplies they need, and to implement change in the way they get back to work.
Great. So just for everyone that is attending, we encourage you to ask questions in the chat function to your right of your screen. And if you want to double click on the slides we have, it'll expand the screen so you can maybe see those a little better. So we'll get right into it. With most offices and public spaces, I know Union Hall has implemented a lot of strategies for making our customers and our employees feel a little safer. These are things we see pretty much everywhere: temperature taking, spaced out seating, mask wearing. But I would love to hear ways that both Kroger and Sparks are making their customers and employees feel safer. So Linnell, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? You can go to Mike.
Sure. So, for us, it's kind of been twofold because we're very open to the public and we have not had the opportunity to shut down at all, really, other than we did obviously change some of our business hours so we could do the deep cleaning and sanitizing in the evenings. But so we have made a lot of different shifts, but they're different depending on the work area. In our stores, we're solving for one thing, and in the office environment, we're kind of solving for something different. And we have multiple office environments. We have some very traditional, today I'm at work and it's a 25-story building, and traditional workspaces with offices and cubes. But then if I go right up the street to Race Street, we've got very open concept type of offices. And so our solve for is very different. And so it is around, as you mentioned, the temperature checking and the PPE and all of the thinking about the overall, the dynamics of how our folks move throughout buildings is another key area that we're really looking at. So when I just think about that safety, it has to be visible. You have to feel a difference. Both our customers and our associates have to feel a difference. And I will tell you, we've taken a lot more time to kind of slow down and listen, even in a very fast-paced environment that we have been in with the influx in sales and things of that nature. And so I think seeing that visible changes and role modeling and saying what we are going to do, we do. And I also think we've shared a lot of our information through our blueprint that we have on our website, just helping people understand all the things. Not that we got it completely right, but I think we've gotten a lot of things right. When we look at our data as far as the number of positive cases that we have relative to the communities that we operate, we are significantly lower rates of any kind of positives than the communities that we operate in almost all cases. So that's exciting. In a bad situation, it's the silver lining in a tough situation, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. For anyone wondering, I shared the blueprint in our chat. So if you want to explore that a little more, put the link right there. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Sparks is doing?
Sure, and again, we're operating both, internally, putting protocols in place so that employees know what to expect. We're still making going to an office sort of voluntary. We do have some of our production teams who are in, workshops, actually manufacturing different things where they need the equipment and they need to be there. But we, internally, we've done all of followed the guidance, spaced out the seating. We're having people come in shifts, so there's not too many people in the space at once. Everyone's wearing a mask. We're providing additional, personal protective equipment as needed for everyone. One of the other things we do is we quite often travel to different venues and destinations to actually implement, events and meetings, and we're providing travel kits for those people as well, so that they can have something to take with them. Obviously, everyone's got their own personal sort of responsibility piece, but we want to make sure that we're providing every opportunity for them to get back to work. For our customers, we're actually offering, what we do in general is create environments that are conducive to doing business, and usually they're temporary environments. So that's a trade show, an event, whatever. But we also do a lot of work in corporate headquarters for a lot of our customers. So we're experts in sort of managing space and looking at the opportunities and the possibilities. So we've actually been offering social distancing as a service, where we'll do a site inspection, we'll suggest what signage should go where. Sometimes we create that signage to be on brand and look and feel like it's part of the company. Some people want it to be bright red and really prominent, and other companies and other people are looking for it to be more subtle and fit in with the rest of the sort of corporate environment we've created. The incorporation of technology is a huge thing too, from the temperature, like you're saying, the temperature scanning to the distancing beacons. There's a lot of different companies now working on different technologies to make sure everyone's aware of who's in the building. The contact tracing, like you were saying, Laura, is a big thing if there is, a spike in activity. So we're really recommending a lot of different things for different people. And Lynelle, as you were saying, implementing these actual practices can be really challenging, and actually coming up with a process to implement the signage and have people go in and install it in a safe way has been something we've really tried hard to do. And coming up with systems. If you go to the next, I think it's the next slide. But working with Salesforce, for example, they've got 141 buildings around the world. They're all multiple level buildings, but coming up with a system where we can provide a floor plan that's really clear and straightforward, both for the employees and for the people, preparing these buildings for people to go back to work. So again, it's been an interesting challenge to get this down when we're doing, multiple buildings, multiple floors per day, so they can get ready to go back to work.
And, Mike, I would add, as I think about, for us, we're doing different things. Yesterday we installed some UV lighting systems into our HVAC that essentially, as air is circulating through our building, that the UV lights essentially are killing bacteria. And it kills, because of the different ratings and things like that, it kills different things. We've also looked at what filters we have in all of our HVAC systems. We've aerated the water systems. If any water sat for any period of time, so no bacteria grew. In here you see that, like, the one-way hallways. Really looking at that traffic flow, as you showed in the previous slide, and saying how do you maintain that minimum of 6 feet distance anytime that you can, and even elevator safety. We now have plexiglass partitions in our elevators so that you can safer put 2 people in each of our elevators to help create more capacity, as we would end up having more people into our offices. So a lot of unique ways to think about how do we help reduce the risk.
Yeah, and actually I wanted to share a different slide. Mike, you mentioned earlier architectural hints to encourage safe distancing. this is a great example on this slide of kind of what you're talking about: strategic signage, things on the floor showing you where to stand,
Yep.
indications of what's been cleaned.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things people is, travel in general, but also, where you sleep each night. You want to be rest assured that, in a hotel, this is the Lowe's Hotel, for example, we're coming up with, again, a system to have that room's completely sanitized and then kind of sealed, so that you can rest assured that when you go in there, you know that it has been sanitized. So again, coming up with systems that take into account sustainability and reusability of certain elements, without creating another ton of junk to be thrown out afterwards, but being able to seal the room in a way that makes people feel safe attending, and then just guiding their movements through the space with directional signage and different architectural cues.
Yeah, and this ties in directly with what Linnell was saying about visible changes in spaces to make everyone feel more comfortable.
Right.
Spaces can't look the same as when you left them back in March. So yeah, with all of these changes, naturally, I think some of this is going to stick post-COVID. Whenever we get there. And I think a lot of that's going to be centered around hygiene, things that people maybe didn't think about as much pre-COVID that are going to be regular practices post-COVID. So, what are some things that you see sticking in your offices, stores, event spaces, hotels post-COVID? If you want to go into details about that. Linnell, you go first.
Okay. So, for me, I really think there's several things. Here at Carter, we've done a lot of things with like motion detection and light with lights and things like that. And we've done it really as part of our Zero Hunger, Zero Waste efforts to be more sustainable. And but I think even more so in expanding that out beyond just light fixtures and things like that is definitely going to be a major change. I also believe that when we think about how we design our workstations and our workspaces will be very, very different. And, it will be a balance, a very blended approach. And if we have how we leverage more office spaces, cubes, and more like the hoteling, and what do those look like? Even in a hoteling situation, how do you create that open feel, but with safety barriers that are there so that you still have that sense of community, which I think is really, really important. And certainly how people move throughout a building. I do believe like we have stairwells in many of our buildings, and we have many of them have at least two, and some are designated as up and some are designated as down. And so that you just don't have that passing in a stairwell. And just the sheer number of people who are using stairs versus the elevators has completely changed. And I really think that ends up being a lifestyle change, really, that you end up making. So sometimes it seems like the simplest things. The other thing I really say is printing. I think when you just think about the amount of printing that most of us have probably done in the last 120 days is very minimal. And I believe that will continue beyond today, which I think is really good for from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're going to see a lot more motion detection, not just with doors, but with lights. And I think we'll automate a lot of things to maybe be on your mobile phone. So calling an elevator might be something that you do through an app now. Adjusting lighting might be something that you do on your personal device. And voice activation is something I think that already becoming popular, and I don't see why that wouldn't kind of transition to solutions here. Mike, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think this is accelerating a lot of the trends we're seeing anyway. So like you were saying, voice activated assistance, motion detection, all of the tools that have been developed, IoT tools that have been developed. This is really forcing them to innovate probably quicker than they would have without the pandemic happening in the first place. So in some ways, it's going to change, I think, the way we work in general. And we as a company have a very flexible work policy, and we like to say work is what we do, not where we go. So, we have 10 offices around the country, but we also have a lot of people in, in remote locations. And, a lot of the collaboration tools, online collaboration tools, scalable, and Linnell, we were talking about this earlier, scalable solutions to fit each different scenario or type of meeting that you want to have, how you want to collaborate. All of those things will continue. I'll talk a little bit more about virtual events later, but we've obviously pivoted a lot to a lot of these virtual events like we're having now, and a massively steep learning curve. They were always around. They've been around the last 10 years, but this, again, a lot of the event world has pivoted to that virtual engagement, and there are so many learnings that are coming weekly from that of best practices and what works and what doesn't, and it's really interesting times right now. So
yeah, I wanted to share an example on the slides here of an example of a new build. So as new developments are happening, I think architect firms are going to take into account a lot of these new, I don't want to call them trends, but I guess hygiene trends. So like Cube Berlin is a building that is a smart building. It uses Internet of Things to let users operate anything that they want in the building from their device, access control, elevators, climate, light control, down to finding out where your team is sitting in the building. So you can directly go find them versus wandering around a building, touching more things, and it'll even identify based on your preferences where you might want to work that day. Like, this conference room is the warmest one. I know you run cold, that sort of thing, which I think is just wild. And I think, this is super future thinking, but I do think that a lot of buildings, especially new builds, are going to start adopting some of this technology. And I know we touched on sort of redesigning floor plans. So I was curious what you guys thought about the return of the cubicle, as I've been reading a lot about.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion around the success of the total open plan office. In sort of architectural circles, some it's great for some businesses, not great for others. From a management point of view, if you need to have a difficult discussion with someone, you need to have some privacy, and obviously some of the information being discussed is confidential. So, some years ago, the Herman Miller Resolve system, which is the one on the left, you can see there, was these 120-degree desks, and it had this sort of sense of privacy with these canopies on wheels that could be moved. But again, if you think about that from a social distancing point of view and knowing who's in your little sphere of influence, it's a great solution. So we might be looking back to some of these solutions where we have slightly higher partitions, and different, again, architectural elements to help to sort of mitigate people getting too close physically. As strange as that sort of sounds when you think back a couple of months ago, but it's going to be a reality, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, I know open floor plans are, we're increasingly popular, especially with startups.
Yep.
So I think going back to like a hybrid of a cubicle almost, like the 120 design that you talked about is a circular design of cubicles that are kind of based on what team you're with. You sit in those sort of circular cubicles that allow you some space, but ability to collaborate still.
I think I think it's the next slide, but I think you'll start seeing, and this is via Cushman & Wakefield in the Netherlands, that they've actually got a thing called the 6-foot office, and what you're seeing here are sort of more subtle, again, structural permanent hints. So the carpet inlays that define an area or a space that is yours, and you should sort of discuss whether you should cross that threshold. Again, just some ideas of the future. But they're also implementing technology where there's this sort of beacon technology that everyone would have some app on their device, and when they came within a certain distance of a beacon positioned under a desk, it would let them know that they're within that 6-foot range. So there's a lot of the big tech companies are working on different technologies with similar kind of goals to allow people to make sure that they're maintaining that 6-foot distance. So again, it's this combination of architectural and technology to create a safer environment for everyone.
Yeah, and make it easier to adhere to some of these social distancing practices that.
Yeah. And, I would say even beyond just the traditional workstations, it goes to like some of the communal areas as well.
Yep.
So thinking about like if you have like a kitchenette type area where people store their food or go and grab the coffee or, eat their lunch. So I just really think like, or they just have just little spaces that they can go like, and most of us, some of us probably have what we call at Kroger, we call them quiet rooms. Originally they were like mother's rooms, and then they've converted based on other people's medical conditions. It's a quiet room that can be used for privacy. And I see also some of the shift in the responsibilities, where before I think I was as an employee like, oh, someone like the company has someone empty my trash, or the company has someone clean the conference room at night, or the company has this do this. And there's really, I think, a shift as well in the responsibilities and these shared responsibilities of the spaces, whether it's your workspace or more the communal spaces, and keeping it safe, clean, and sanitized. And so I think that is also a big shift, that it's a behavior shift, not just the actual equipment itself. Some will be equipment, but much of it will be the behavior shift, I think, that will happen as well.
Yeah, and it runs through the details. I mean, there was a great article in the New York Times called "No More Gummy Bears." A lot of these open plan offices had these giant jars of gummy bears, and you just went and helped yourself. The type of like snacks and food service and things that we'll be able to offer, I think, will again be driven by this need to make sure that we're not spreading germs wantonly through the space. So again, it's going to run through all the details in every office, and it's going to be an interesting transition, I think, to a lot of single serve pre-packaged foods that we can actually offer our employees, and again, there'll be implications that come with that. So
yeah, even a minimalist look when you think about this amount of stuff that you have at your workstation. So in order to do good deep cleans and sanitization, you have to have like a good clean space. So like at Kroger, one of the things we're doing in some of our environments is it's a misting system. And it's used today in a lot of school systems and like commissary kitchens and large restaurants and stuff like that. But it's a misting system that essentially a mist of safe sanitizer is spread across all surfaces, and then it air dries, and it really kills everything that is there. And in order to do those things, like you don't want paper or, and it's just because it will get wet, not because it would be unsafe to touch afterwards. But so really keeping the workstations very clean and clear is going to be another big shift.
Yeah. I want to touch on some of these questions that are in the chat. So Pete asked, what advice do you give families for designing a school at home? So, I mean,
well, I wish I had a good answer for that one.
I mean, Linnell, you touched on like Kroger having quiet spaces. I think if families have that ability to create a room that is able to be like this is where you do your homework, take your online classes, having a separate area aside from like the kitchen table or dining room table would be helpful for like a attention standpoint.
Yeah.
But not all families have that, I guess, option.
Yeah. And Mike, I don't know what your circumstances are with children. We have two, and one is 7 and going into the 2nd grade. And I will tell you, I don't know if there is the right answer. It's a very personal decision, I think, that you have to make on what where your kids are going to, how they're going to receive their education, and then what that looks like for you. And what I would say is kids are easy to condition, right? As long as you're very clear in what the expectations are. What you lose control of is the surroundings around you. And but I agree with you, Laura. I think resetting up your home spaces, if there is going to be learning from home and working from home or both, really reconfiguring some of your home spaces to designated areas, I think, is really important. Some of you may have joined a little earlier, and we had to have like a schedule. That routine is has been really important in our household. So that it is, okay, we still wake up at the same time, we get ready, school is from this time to this time, then we take, it's like, so the routine has been super helpful. But I would just tell you, from being open to the public and seeing as much as we have seen as an organization, it's around the structure, I think, is really important with whatever choice you make with your kids. And I think it goes well beyond school. I think it goes with play dates and socialization and extracurricular activities and all of those things. They're all the really tough decisions that we have to make as parents.
Yeah, and hopefully schools are adopting some of these practices that offices are adopting. And if they have the ability and budget to create safer environments for our kids if they do go back to school in the fall.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've got a 12 and a 14-year-old, two boys. They don't come with an instruction manual, unfortunately. And they had almost identical at-home learning setups. They both have a desk in their room, and we again tried to stick to the structure of this is when you start, this is when you finish. One of them just got the best report card he's ever got, and the other one is still catching up from the social distance learning because he just didn't respond well to the same situation. So it's interesting dynamic. I think we providing that routine and the structure and the checklist, the check-ins, staying in close contact with their teachers is another thing we found has been really helpful. I think the schools are still learning the best way to approach, and they're starting to understand that one size does not fit all for the kids as well. Some kids respond really well and other kids just don't, and they've been very open and honest about that, which has been great.
Yeah. Another question we got, just to shift it back to office spaces. Kids, I don't know what the answer is. I can tell you how my dog is reacting to having to stay home, but that's not helpful. So based on what we're seeing, companies and events, are they looking at systems like contact tracing on the back end, as well as the prevention on the front end? So I can speak from a Union Hall standpoint. During quarantine, when we had to shut down, it was an excellent opportunity to upgrade our door access system. So we implemented a system where you unlock the doors with an app on your phone, which then on the back end, we're able to see who came in on what day and what time, which is a great resource for if we do have to contact trace and let people know if they've been exposed. So it was sort of an upgrade to our system to make it easier on the users to access the building, but also kind of a benefit on the back end for us to do that if the time comes. What are you guys thinking for event spaces as well as the Kroger office space?
So for us, we have, there's a lot of things I think that go in there. I think we'll solve for your own associates or your workforce, but then it's also any visitors or guests that you may have. And it may be as simple as like the FedEx driver or the UPS driver, and how are you going to handle these things? And how are you going to do notifications and all of those things? So the contact tracing is, I will tell you, we're handling it in different ways depending on the environment. So in some ways, it's a digital opportunity to do the contact tracing. We don't have some of those same luxuries in maybe some of our store environments, just based on some of the dynamics that are there. So it's very much the conversation that is taking place to help do that contact tracing on who you come in contact with. So there's many ways we can do it digitally. Some is very manual in nature. I would also say a lot of it can be an opt-in. You're going to have to be very, very careful with whatever solution that you use, because if there is with medical information, it is where is it housed and how long does it stay there? You have to just so protect yourself. These are times under some of these circumstances, it might be better to, because a lot of solutions, technology solutions will offer you all these things, but they could be an infringement on people's rights. And so I would say consult, if you have a labor and employment attorney, consult with that labor and employment attorney. It will be good advice that you will get on how to best handle some of those conversations. The other is notification. So it's not just the contact tracing, but what does the notification process look like when you have a potential exposure and then when you have a confirmed case? In today's environment, I don't know what you all are dealing with, but even in our office environment, last night I got a notification that someone who has not been in our office for 120 days, since March 13th, tested positive. And as the HR representative, obviously still have a responsibility, even though they have not been in any of our office spaces. But I still want to make sure I show the care and concern. And if notification were necessary, what does that look like? So having all of those tools are really important.
Yeah, that's a great point about the not divulging too much about the positive ways, giving people enough information to let them know that you should probably go get tested.
Yes. Yeah, you do. And we do have some resources we do have within the blueprint that we have posted. It's very general in terms, and there's a lot of tools and solutions that you can use, whether it's the Society for Human Resources, like that. I would say do your research to help understand what that conversation should or shouldn't look like on how much information you share. But transparency without violating any rights of anyone is really important. It will keep the trust that you have with your associates, that you are giving them as much real-time information as you can.
That's great. Mike, anything to add to that before we move on to the next segment?
No, I think that's spot on, and we're sort of in the same boat. The notification protocol and who do we tell how much when it's a tough one, and obviously there's an obligation to be as transparent as possible, and we've been following that sort of guidance from our HR team as well. So.
So Hector had a question, with these new practices, what kind of communication styles or methods have you adapted now that we don't have like physical language cues, which I think we'll cover in this next section pretty well. So we'll just dive in. These are considerations for virtual events and meetings. Obviously, we can't really meet in person internally, whether it's with your team or if it's for a large event like this. Signal's usually an in-person event, and here we are. So this is really your area of expertise. So I want to leave lots of room and time for you to go over all of these examples. But like for Kroger, for example, I mean, quickly, what are some ways that your team has adopted to stay in touch and still create a company culture around, virtual?
Yeah. So, we have been on, it's been an evolution. When we've been solving for many things along the way. So the first was immediately like, how do you get people working from home, and can they get connection? Do they have access to everything they need access to, right? So we went from there to how do you have an effective virtual discussion? And we were saying, like, there's some things where people are like, oh, we're not going to do one-on-ones anymore, or we're not going to do this. And we're like, no, actually, it's even more important that you do these daily huddles. We do daily huddles with most of our immediate team members, and they are quick little check-ins. How you doing? How you feeling? What you got going on today? Anything you need help with? Very similar as you would do in the office, where you would kind of walk around and you say good morning to folks. It's really kind of our way of doing that, either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. But I will tell you the solutions that we are using from a technology. So and then it's now becoming more of being a leader in an environment that is kind of like, how do you lead in a time of crisis while you're still running a business, has been kind of that transition that we've been through. And here soon, we're building out modules on how do you work in a blended environment. The technology has been a big part of that. So here at Kroger, we used to use conference calls a lot. We use Verizon conference lines, and Skype were our two channels. And when you use Skype, 9 times out of 10, you might have shared screens, but a lot of people didn't turn cameras on. Full transparency, right? We would chat and maybe share screens or share slides, and we have completely shifted to using Teams almost solely. And we've pushed on technology companies like Microsoft, for example, on enhancements that we need to see in that solution to better serve us. But we have other solutions that we're using. We're using Zoom on some things, and then we have like an internal network that we are using. In some cases, we're doing pre-recordings, and some is live. So there's a lot of variability. I know Mike has a lot more kind of great solutions, especially from a technology perspective that you've been able to leverage.
Yeah, I mean, Google is one of our biggest customers, and so we've always been heavy on Google products and collaboration tools. Zoom is also one of our clients, and we've been, working with them. There's a lot of learnings happening real time about what works especially for large events. We're encouraging people looking forward in the short term anyway the science is showing that outdoor is a much better environment to be in as far as mitigating transmission. And it's a time where there's a lot of creative solutions coming to the fore. So I don't know if you know, but Walmart's talking about converting their parking lots into drive-in movie theaters at night. There's some great ideas as far as watching a keynote from a boat. Your distance, you're in a fun environment. There's all these different ideas kicking around about still having these sort of large moments where brands can talk about the newest, latest, and greatest thing, but making it in a way where you do feel connected to an audience or around you or attendees around you. And then also we're having to create these experiences now. The number one reason people used to go to events was for networking, right? To meet as many people as possible to make those connections, and that's going to change as we all start going back to live experiences. The virtual piece, the virtual tools that have been developed to extend and amplify those events is going to stay with us. And we're seeing a lot of events that have gone purely virtual, but some of them are now taking this kind of hybrid approach where they have a physical presence and then a virtual overlay. There's a lot of companies who are doing it really, really well. But you've really got to think through. It's almost a slightly different skill set now. We're almost all become sort of broadcasters, if in a certain sense. So looking at the art direction, making sure the presentation's really well put together, preparing the speakers, recording as much stuff as possible. I don't know if anyone saw the Apple developer conference, but it was like watching an amazing, polished TV show talking about the latest developments in the software, and it is a slightly different skill set. We were talking earlier, like normally at an event, the CEO comes out on stage, and to be a good CEO takes many things. Not every CEO is a great person to speak in front of a live audience. It's a unique skill. But now having the ability to pre-record and do what we're calling a content drop gives them the opportunity to do several takes to really create content that is as polished as it can possibly be, and deliver the messages to the right people at the right time. And that's the role of live events is going to shift, I think, a little bit to become that content generation engine where you'll have a few people, the right people in a room having a conversation like we're having now, and this becomes the content that is shared out through all the other digital channels that we know are safe. So it's an interesting time, but to create that content, and again, some people are at home and do not have access to high-end video recording. So we're sending out basically a studio in a box or a live stream in a box, so they can record that content, and it gets recorded remotely, but also gets recorded directly to the system they're talking to, and then we can access that and edit it as needed. Some people are building studios. We actually did our own live event. We wanted to make sure we understood every nuance of what it takes to actually have a live event, from all of the upfront, sort of stage direction, scripting, the content itself. So we actually built a studio in our Philadelphia office and recorded a live event, and then went back and sort of pulled it apart and figured out which bits worked really well and which bits didn't work as well as they could have, just to shape our point of view on what best practices are. We've obviously we have a strategy team who's auditing most of the bigger live, virtual events that are happening. And again, there's a lot of findings coming out of that, but we wanted to go through it ourselves to make sure we knew exactly what. And this was a few months ago, and now we've got a few other learnings to pile on top of that. But coming across, setting the right tone. The quality of the production is really important. And again, we're all kind of, like I said, broadcasters at the moment. And so being able to create that quality content, both from what's being said and how it's being seen, is again key to sort of creating the right message. And you have to offer sort of scalable solutions too. So we're creating some products and brands really want a physical environment that reflects their brand and allows you to explore. This is a way to really engage people in an environment that is appropriate to your brand, with the products you want them to see, the service offerings that you have. We now have the ability to create a virtual environment, to take you on a guided tour through that environment where you will see what I will see. We can be on having a live video conference, and then we can actually talk to the products we're offering live and spin them around in space and have a live conversation in a virtual environment at many levels. You can book appointments, you can ask for more information. There's a range of different, you can also allow people just to wander around and look at these things. And this runs from sort of smaller, event, trade show type spaces through to entire events. And you've probably all seen, you can create your own avatar, you can go in there, you can interact with people live, you can do sort of virtual networking, you can follow up with people. There's a range of different options now as far as creating that sort of virtual event environment and creating a content-rich environment that doesn't feel like you're just landing on a website.
Yeah. I mean, so. Double click on the VR, I think, to go back to company culture and how to build new styles of communication. I think offices and companies could adopt some virtual reality techniques or tools to allow their employees to meet virtually. It's really could replace a water cooler conversation with a Google Hangout. Yeah. So why not have this VR room, almost break room, where when employees have some downtime, they can go and chat with each other and it feels real, and you can, play with things and touch things and move things around in the VR space and also feel like you're talking to a real person that's on your team.
And just to build on top of that, and what Lynelle said earlier, we actually have virtual happy hours. We have, virtual employee resource group meetings. We do sort of ask people to give us a tour. One of the things we did earlier was show us where you're working from. Give us a tour of your place. And we give people a heads up so they can, make the bed and do whatever else. But I actually feel like, and again, that over communication, I actually feel like we are a lot closer, especially for the guys who I work with on the West Coast. I know more about them now than I did 3 or 4 months ago, because I've had a much more insight into their situation, their lives, how they live, rather than it's a much more personal connection, I think, because we've had more one-on-ones, we've had more of these sort of off the cuff kind of chats via video conference, but it's been great to get to see a bit more about them.
Yeah.
Rate their backdrops and give them grief about where's the couch that's missing? Why haven't you put a couch there? Come on. Yeah. So it's fun. We've had a bit of fun with it. And what we're seeing with events too is, if you're having a high-end VIP event, we're actually sending something to people's houses, right? And it might be a bottle of wine. And then part of the event would be a sommelier coming on and telling you all about this wine and the hints and the flavors, and you're actually sitting there drinking the wine as they're talking through it. So we're combining that in real life with in real virtual life. And again, things like that where we can actually utilize the distribution channels that exist to get to people's addresses and send them something physical, and then we can actually have that kind of content overlay virtually and make it a really engaging and fun thing, and people have the opportunity to comment and ask questions. And but it's a shared experience then. It's truly a shared physical experience in a virtual world.
Yeah. And I think you can use this opportunity as a way to build trust within a team. So yeah, working from home, you might feel a little distant, but if you use the right tools, there's a way to build a
Yep.
culture and a way to build trust between employees that you may not have gotten if you were in the office. So it looks like our time is up. Thank you both so much for your time and your expertise. And thank you to everyone who tuned in.